G'day, Professor Joseph Drew. There's a lot of rubbish being talked by politicians, by the media, particularly our national broadcaster, about inflation, what its causes are, who mostly gets hurt by it. In this video, I'll set the story straight. It's important to absolutely every Australian. It's important to local government because that's one of the massive challenges you have. So listen, flick the video on, subscribe, all those things. This is a really important message to get sorted out. So what is inflation? It's a reduction in the purchasing power of money, i.e. you can buy less stuff for every dollar when we have inflation. Now, there are a number of causes of inflation, but the main cause is what I'm talking about in this video because it has to be brief to keep people's attention. And the main cause has always been money supply. Milton Friedman is famous for his dictum that inflation is always and everywhere a money supply problem. People cut out the second part of that statement, and the second part of the statement is crucial, where the increase in money supply outstrips the productive output of the economy. And that's given by a well-known formula that economists all subscribe to, I think, which is that money supply times the velocity of money equals the productive output of the economy times the price level. If you increase the money supply and the velocity stays the same and the productive output stays the same, well, then the price level will increase. If you're even sillier and you manage to reduce the productive output of the economy like we did during COVID times, and you increase the money supply, well, then the price level is going to increase a lot. Friedman and Sauer also famous for saying central banks do more harm than good. They're right. They do even more harm now than what they did back in the 80s when Friedman was saying these things, because the financial landscape has changed. There's less people that have mortgages and there's fixed rate mortgages and things like that. So they were right on that point also. In a minute, I'll talk through this graph and you'll understand why you have less purchasing power. You can get less stuff for every dollar. Or, thinking about it another way, prices are going through the roof. But before we do, we need to also get to another point that Friedman was very big on, that inflation is a sneaky tax. It comes about predominantly because of government deficits. It has the effect of raising money to fund government spending, but unlike a tax hike where everyone screams and jumps up and down and you lose political capital, inflation, you can pretend, oh, nothing to do with us. Most people don't even join the dots. And you can even pretend that you're fighting inflation and that you're concerned about it. So you can fund your spending and people don't even realize that they're paying for it every time they go to the checkout. So what happened during COVID? Have a look. You can see this data is from the World Bank. You can see money supply in Australia, 2019 increased by about 14%, 2020 increased by 13%. There's no way in the world our economy was increasing by those figures. In fact, it was contracting for some of that time because we were all locked in our homes. That's why we have inflation. It's as simple as that. There's no point pretending otherwise. People need to join the dots. There was always going to be a cost for the COVID measures, and for effective measures, I don't think anyone minded paying the cost. I certainly didn't. But for a lot of the measures that weren't even slightly effective, it's a problem that I'm now paying for that. It's also a problem that people didn't realize that they would be paying the very hefty bill from the COVID policies. That should have been pointed out at the time instead of just handing out money as if there was no consequence and that some people in the community wouldn't end up having to foot the bill. So that was the first story to get straight. That inflation is not something that accidentally happened. It's a result of government policy, and particularly the policies around COVID. It's just undeniable whether we like it or not. The second piece of rock that's talked about is that the people hit worst by inflation are the people at the bottom of the income scale, or sometimes, and people on welfare. And in the second case, it's just plain not true, I'm afraid. Okay, what does inflation do? It reduces the purchasing power of every dollar you have. if you're on your welfare, you probably don't have many dollars stashed away in the bank or under your mattress. So inflation's going to have little effect on you. But you say, oh, the prices are going up. And I say that Social Security is increased twice per year according to inflation. In fact, they use two measures and they pick the higher of the two. So the welfare money income is keeping up with the reduction in the purchasing power in any case. So it's just not true. The people who are hurt most by inflation are people that have savings, but there's little sympathy for people who have savings in Australia. And it is true, of course, that you get more interest on your savings in banks at the moment, but it's also true that that interest rate is not keeping up with the reduction in purchasing power. And it's also true that you get taxed on your interest. So it's beyond a doubt that you are losing money if you have money sitting in the bank. If you have it sitting on your mattress, you're losing even more, which is why people are piling into speculative assets like equities and bitcoins and things like that. And that's why we built a lovely bubble that no doubt will go broke at some stage. The other people who are hurt by inflation are wage earners, particularly since the EBAs came in. They're usually 3-year negotiations, and it could be considerable time after inflation before you get to negotiate a pay increase, and you can't do anything in that interim. And in that period of time, the real value of your income is going down. The other group of people that are hit hard by inflation are people with mortgages, not because of inflation, but because of the government and central bank policy to fight inflation, which is to move up the variable interest rates. So once again, just like during the public policy interventions during COVID, the people who have been hit most are the wage earners and families in particular who typically have mortgages. So what's been talked about in our national broadcast is just plain not true. People who also benefit from inflation. Lots of people forget about this. If you've got debt, fixed rate debt in particular, the real value of that debt is going down, which means you get a benefit from inflation. In particular, government is a big beneficiary of inflation, which is why they huff and puff and carry on, but when push comes to shove, they're not that interested in doing anything about the problem. Now, of course, inflation is far more complex than what I've been able to cover in a 10-minute video. I've written a whole chapter in my forthcoming book, Creating Human Value, which gives you all the detail you need. So don't bother attacking me for leaving out some of the complexity, but I've told you the main things. And what I'm particularly interested in is refuting the silly statements that are coming out of our politicians and our mainstream media, who all have biases and incentives to tell you a particular story. My incentive is to tell you the truth. This is what this channel is all about. Make sure you flick the video on, make sure you subscribe, and in that way you help me. This is absolutely essential for local government, general managers and CFOs to get on top of. If you listen to your regulators, your revenue will not keep apace with your expenses, and ultimately you will be financially unsustainable. So please listen to the facts instead. That's why these videos are important, and I thank you very much for your time. Goodbye.